Are we good now? Hold on. We should be good now. Um, while it's live, because I used to think that was impossible for a long period of time. Um, Whatever. We should be good now. Should be able to hear myself here pretty soon. There we go. While it's live. All right, cool. Let's do it. Let's get this stupid show popping. While it's live, because I used to think that was impossible for a long period of time. Close that out. Open the dashboard and pop off, bro. It's time to have one of the best shows we've ever had. Mainly because we're utilizing the least time we've probably ever had to pull off a show. So it's gonna be a lot of me talking. Because once again, the objective is to get this show done before Thursday Night Football kicks off in 40 minutes. You're free to do what you got to do. I shall, my journey shall begin here. And everything's queued up. All right, let's get it popping. Going live in 3, 2, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and everybody else in between. My name is Ashton Gene Lewis, and I'm sorry, we're going to have to skip on the pleasantries. We have exactly 40 minutes to get this show off before Thursday Night Football, and subsequently, Week 10 begins. Last week, we did not win our race against time. Sometimes time wins. Today, I'm determined to come out victorious. If you don't know how the Thursday shows rock here on the Broke Boy Sports Podcast, we recap the previous week of the NFL season, and to keep it fresh and light, we utilize every single second up until that week of the NFL season is over to determine whether or not, we did our recap in enough time. It's almost like writing a paper in college and turning it in at 11:59:59. That's the rush that we're going for here when we do our recap. Even though so many big-time podcasts that come to talk about football and stuff on a regular basis, one, they have Monday shows where they just recap how they feel, and as time goes on, the advanced stats come out later in the week, which is the number one reason that I do this show on this day. Also, I watch every single game, so it takes a lot of time for a person who has like a regular job and has to watch this and watch other sports. Like, I've been slowly but surely watching every single NBA team in some way, shape, or form while trying to keep up with the constant barrage of wild shit that is going on in the league. Anyway, let's dive right into it. So we need to discuss one thing in particular, and that's my streak. So if you don't know, I have two pick'em leagues that I am in. One is against the spread. The other one is straight up against the money line, and it is only those things happening on ESPN and nowhere else. I'm not using these picks anywhere else on the internet, is what I'm going to say into this microphone. Anyway, sorry, I'm trying to find trying to reduce the number of ums on the show and the likes. I am trying to find the email that you get sent after every single week is over, and it basically breaks down the picks that you made the previous week, because guess what? We only got 6 right in terms of the spread, but guess what? Last week was so bad for everybody in this in the pick'em leagues overall, it was enough to have 9. So we got 9 right against. We got 9 correct. We were 9 out of 13. So we only missed 4? We missed 9. We went 9-4 against the money line, and then against the spread, we went 6 of 13. So like a little bit under 50%, which happens. Against the spread, it happens. But it was enough to get us into the 75th percentile. Remember, our percentile dropped off significantly because of that 1 week I had the flu and I did not get any answers. I will also point out, I went and looked at a bunch of stuff. In particular, I went and looked at the top guys in the pick'em leagues, like in ESPN's pick'em league, and I looked at the wins and losses. Obviously, my wins, because of the plus points, are not where they need to be, but I don't pick Thursday Night Football, and I have right around the same amount of losses on my record as those guys do. So that means we're not too far off from where, in theory, we should be if we want to one day rule the world, perhaps betting on football. But that's not my goal. Of course, my ultimate goal is to become the greatest sportscaster of all time. And the only way to do that is for me to move on to the next segment, which is, by the way, if you're new to the show, if you're old to the show, it's time for the nuke, ladies and gentlemen. Everybody knows what the nuke is. They just have different names for it. The nuke is a mythical person, very similar to Florida Man, a mythical being that appears but once a week against one opponent. And it's a player so powerful in the NFL that their single-handed performance absolutely fucked you in your fantasy matchup. So this week's nuke is pretty simple. There was a guy who scored 5 touchdowns, and 4 of them were rushing. 1 of them was receiving. He had 211 total yards. It is Joe the Main Man Mixon, who has some of the worst celebrations in all the NFL, according to many people on the internet. But Joe Mixon went out there and absolutely cooked. I saw in ESPN's regular formatted fantasy leagues, which, I kind of disagree with a little bit. I feel like if you get 211 yards and 5 touchdowns, you should get a little bit more than 55 points. But if you think about, there are some people who did not score 55 points in their fantasy league in standard scoring this week. That's pretty good because basically all you needed was like 10 points from 4 other players on your team, and that's 90. And if you're one of those leagues where like 110 usually wins, or like 150 or something like that, Joe Mixon, and I'm sure there's somebody on the internet who had Joe Mixon in their lineup and lost their matchup, but it's kind of hard to fumble the bag when you get a singular player that gets half the points you need to be able to win most games in fantasy. So it was pretty clutch. Joe Mixon doing it. We're going to talk about what happened in that game a little bit later on, because we are at the halfway point of the NFL season, and we are also at a point now where we need to discuss we're really not even at a point where we need to discuss who's real and who's fake, because guess what, guys? The big takeaway from the halfway point of the season is to, one, half the season is gone, but to also point out the very obvious fact of, if you are halfway through a test and you have everything 100% correct, that's fantastic, but you also still have a failing grade. 50% is an F. I never went to a school that had Ds or anything like that, so I don't know what the concept of a D is. Everything that was below a 60, I think it was everything below a 70 was an F where I went to school, or like 65 or something like that. Anyway, let's move on. Let's talk a little bit more football. We talked about the streaks. We talked about the nuke for this week. It's time to talk about the foosball. We're not doing streaks, peaks, and ditches because we need to save some time to be able to discuss what these teams are going on at this point. So we're at the halfway point of the season, and I kind of ran down like a short list of teams that I think could potentially be Super Bowl contenders, and you tell me what you think on this one. So I have Chiefs, Bills. Obviously, those are the 2 that we started the season with, so it's going to be a little bit hard to shake the concept that they absolutely are ass, even though the Bills just came off of an ugly loss versus the Jets. We'll talk about that when we get to it. That game is more about the Jets than it is the Bills, and it's also about something else that's going on with the Bills. The Ravens, a team that I feel like a lot of people have a lot of hype behind and believe a ton in, but the fact of the matter is the Ravens are a team that has not, at times they've looked like elite. Like we've talked about this before, right? How the Ravens are one of the worst second half teams in the NFL. How they just disappear, their offense shuts down, right? Playing through 4 quarters is massively important, especially if you want to win a championship. There's like one guy in particular, he's considered to be the greatest quarterback of all time, and his whole thing is in the 4th quarter with very minimal amount of time, he plays his best football, and that the timing works out well. the Ravens have shown that they usually get ahead early and their defense carries them all the way to the end. They've had a couple of games where they've played completely through 4 quarters, but for the most part, I felt like early on in the season, the Ravens defense was getting blamed for some of the comebacks that were happening, when in fact, the Ravens offense legitimately would just shut down the Vikings with a question mark on there. Hard to immediately jump into the potential Super Bowl winner category when it comes to the Vikings, but the fact of the matter is they are one of the best teams in the NFL, and they just came off of a pretty grimy win versus the Washington Commanders, and that's massively important for the success of any team. The ability to win in a multitude of ways is always going to get you where you want to go when it's all said and done. Only time will tell whether or not they're for real about it, because of course, when it comes to the Vikings, we'll talk about what's different about them this season, because it's basically one thing. They're getting in one possession games and not losing. Like they're getting in one possession games and coming up with ways to win, which is something that they really struggled with last year. So that was one of the huge takeaways from this season for me personally already. The Browns. So this is solely on me. I think I'm one of the few people that thinks the Browns are like a legit Super Bowl contender, because I've watched so much of their film, and I'm also realizing, and I think a lot of other people are starting to realize, as time goes on and it comes time to decide who's going to win the AFC North, it's going to be important to factor in the fact, like, you got to look and be realistic about the fact that, yeah, the Ravens are currently 6-3 on the season, the Browns are 3-5, but those 3 wins that they have are with a backup quarterback, which are important to being able to stay in this one. The Bengals are kind of heating up a little bit, mainly because of their opponent, but the Browns have a key win versus the Bengals, and if they sweep them in the division, that puts them over the top on that one. They are also, 2 weeks away from having one of the best quarterbacks that the league has known. Not that I'm here to support anything that Deshaun Watson did, because, now that the money has been paid out to all these people, there is, you can talk about everything that we think happened, but the fact of the matter is like the people feel like they've been given the appropriate retribution for the things that were done against them and to them by Deshaun Watson. So talking about him in a football sense, he's going to be a massive upgrade at the quarterback position, and that's saying a lot, because Jacoby Brissett, I think we can all agree, one of the most impressive guys so far this season in the NFL in terms of like backup quarterbacks that have moved into a starting role. He has had a lot of one possession games that have not gone their way, which is the crazy part about it, right? Like, that's the important part to point out. They've had multiple one possession games that just haven't gone their way. They've gone up against a really good Jets team, which now we look back on it retroactively. Yes, the Jets are different than they were in like week 2, but that fact that game was that close between these two teams was massively important for the Browns as a whole. The Browns defense is still trying to get a little bit better, but now with Myles Garrett back, their pressure is back where they need it to be for their DBs to be able to be successful. The 49ers also on this list. For me personally, it's hard for me to bet against a top-tier elite level defense, which is what the 49ers have. And I think that's going to go, and of course, like it has in years past, it's going to carry them a long way. I believe in DeMeco Ryans. If you guys don't know, I'm from Houston, Texas. I root for the Texans and I root for the Seahawks. And I root for the Seahawks because I love the position of linebacker, and I think it's like one of the coolest things in all of football. Bobby Wagner is my favorite active NFL player, my favorite inactive NFL player in Texans history, DeMeco Ryans. I have his jersey. I have like his team hat. They used to make team hats for players where it was literally like the team jersey number for that player, and I have the one for DeMeco Ryans. So yeah, I mean, I'm about this life. You know what I mean? I'm true to it, not new to it, as the people would say. As the older peeps would say. Wow, man. Audio check there. Sorry about that. Ooh, man, that's so bad. Sorry about that for the podcast, folks. We were double checking the audio on Twitch. Anyway, the 49ers, I think, are in the mix. And then I got the Seahawks on my list. I got the Seahawks into the mix here because they've clearly taken the mantle of the quote-unquote dark horse, which is going to be massively important, especially in these playoffs, because I think a lot of us are also struggling with the concept of what a playoff team looks like now, because there are extra ones now. There are 2 wild card seeds, and they're going to be around, so you have to factor... Yeah, got to put that away. But you have to factor in that playoff teams have a different appearance now. They have different factors that put them in because now there are teams that are like 2 or 3 wins above 500 that are going to make the playoffs and actually be a threat to a certain degree. For instance, the Dolphins very much could be a wild card too, or a wild card team in general, because if you guys haven't noticed, the AFC Beast has emerged. So the Bills, the Jets, and the Dolphins all have 6 wins. The Dolphins with a key game versus the Bills. And, of course, the Dolphins with the key game versus the Jets, if I'm not mistaken off the top of my head. Dolphins on a 3-game winning streak after beating the Bears in what was probably the most exciting game of this entire week. And other than that, man, like the AFC West has not turned out to be the arms race that we all thought it was going to be. Justin Herbert, since that rib injury, just really hasn't been the same. They're also waiting on Mike Williams and Keenan Allen to get back out there on the field. I heard some people speculating that, hey, man, now the Chargers are getting their injuries out of the way early, that when the second half of the season rolls around, their guys will be healthy and they'll be ready to make that run, which I think is like a legitimate thing for sure. But yeah, for me personally, from what I've seen out of the Dolphins, that's the Super Bowl contending level team. A lot of talent on that team and a lot of great potential to win in a multitude of ways, especially now that they have Raheem Mostert leading the running game, which I think is something they've kind of been trying to get to for a while now since they got Raheem. But that time is here and that time is now. Chase Edmonds is all the way in Denver and he is fighting an uphill battle at 3-5 with the Denver Broncos. But yeah, I got the Ravens out of the AFC North as a Super Bowl contender. The Chiefs, I don't have the Chargers in there mainly because like their history as a whole. The Bills, the Dolphins, not necessarily believing in the Jets, but the Jets are looking like they're going to be a playoff team. I don't put the Titans in that category, and we're going to talk about why, because what happened in their game versus the Chiefs was truly awe-inspiring and also horrifying at the same time. The Eagles obviously got to be the top tier front runner. They got to be the true number one, sitting at the way the situation is right now. They're 8-0. And they got a chance to go 9-0, obviously, just like everybody else. The Cowboys are looking like a playoff team. Please, we need to simmer down. We need to simmer that down a little bit. Let's be for real. The Seahawks are 6-3. The 49ers at 4-4, like we mentioned already. Those are they're 2 dark horses. The Seahawks may be a divisional champion when it's all said and done, depending on what happens to the Rams, who I think could be like, one of those teams in the second half of the season that turns it on just a little bit. The Vikings, we mentioned them already. And then for the NFC South, I don't think any of those guys are Super Bowl contenders. But, what do I know? If I knew everything, I'd be rich. If I knew everything about the future and what things are going to happen in the NFL, I would be rich. Moving on. Let's talk about some games. We got the categories, ladies and gentlemen. If you're new to the show, we break every single game for every single week down into 4 different categories, if I'm not mistaken. We have the snooze fest, the heartbreakers. The heartbreakers are the games that really just, when you watched them, it was tough for you as a fan to continue to watch them. And they also have like a little bit of a twinge of something that could be going on in terms of like the breaking of the hearts of the team. The oh my category, where we talk about the games that have something interesting, off kilter, some information that we didn't think was a thing until we watched this game. The this is what we're here for category, which is of course all the games that truly were amazing and that we were actually here for to enjoy. So that was a ton of fun, and it was a big part of why the this is what we're here category is what we enjoy about the show. Anyway, let's take it from the top. Let's start with the snooze fest. You guys know how this one goes. There's a couple of these games that could have ended up in this category, but I only have one that truly was a snooze fest. Actually, probably 2. Ravens Saints was in there for obvious reasons. The Ravens kind of the Ravens were expected to win that game. They kind of ran away with it. The Saints couldn't get any momentum going in terms of their offense, which is actually surprising because the last 3 weeks, they've looked like one of the better offenses in the NFL. Andy Dalton has been able to piece it together a little bit here and there, and they kind of cooked a little bit. They're coming off of a win where they got one of the few shutouts that have happened so far in the NFL as a whole, and that's massively important in terms of like reinforcing the idea and the belief that we all have about we all believe that the Saints have one of the best defenses in the NFL, and it was only a matter of time until they got an offense. Well, what the real goal was to get an offense that matched up to the tempo and the intensity of the Saints defense, and it seemed like just for a mere moment, one magic moment versus the Raiders, which we all should have not fallen for that one, that they had put it together. But, only time will tell. Alvin Kamara is staying with the Saints, so they got to figure out how to make this whole thing work. And I feel like just giving the ball to Alvin Kamara more is just going to get you exactly where you want to go. Snooze Fest category, though, only one game. It was Thursday Night Football last week, the Eagles taking on the Texans. This one was relatively close for a very short period of time, and then real life happened. The Eagles were able to run as much as they wanted to because the Texans have, if not if not the worst run defense in the NFL. And if you watch them play football, it's pretty obvious why. Run fits do not happen. They also have this thing where they over pursue based off of the direction of the run. The defensive line is a little bit lighter. They went up against one of the best, if not the best, offensive lines in the NFL. And it was just one of those things, It was one of those things where, like, the pure logic of, the Eagles really good running football. The Texans very bad at stopping run. And then as time goes on, they slowly pulled away. 27-19 was the final score in that one. Deceptive final score. We'll also point out the interesting factor in this one. The trade deadline was 2 days prior to this game, and Brandon Cooks was expecting to get traded. And Brandon Cooks is still a Houston Texan. He is also not playing for the rest of the season, which is obvious for reasons why. Sorry, I gotta fix something real quick. Obvious reasons why he's not playing. He does not agree. Well, the team is tanking, so there's that. He doesn't agree with that mentality, doesn't agree with that approach, which is understandable. He wants to go to a contending team, and to Brandon Cooks' credit, he's basically only ever competed on a contending team his entire time in the NFL. Like, he was with the Saints when they were very good. He was with the Patriots when they made a Super Bowl run, which is how he got his Super Bowl ring. And he's also always had somebody who has had the ability to throw him the ball when he's open. And we are talking about a Houston Texans team that did not have their first touchdown to a wide receiver until week 4, if I'm not mistaken, versus the Chargers. So, yeah, there's that. It was a snooze fest. It was a Thursday Night Football game, which is a prime candidate any given week for Thursday Night Football. The ratings for Thursday Night Football, which I'm very interested to hear how they gather those and also who got that information, because ratings are different. Also, if you are one of those people who doesn't have Amazon Prime, just get on Twitch. They show Thursday Night Football on Twitch. So yeah, we got 20 minutes to get through the rest of these games, and I actually believe that we can get this done. We're going to go to it. The Texans are a team not trying to contend for any type of, they're allergic to victory, and they're trying to keep it that way, trying to get one step closer to Bryce Young. You know what I mean? The Eagles, Super Bowl contender. Heartbreakers, this is one of those games. These are heartbreaker type games. The Chargers, who are on their third kicker in the past 3 weeks. So Dustin Hopkins, if we all recall, I think it was Thursday Night Football where this happened, where Dustin literally couldn't plant his foot. He would kick. He kicked 4 field goals in one night and a couple of PATs. And every time he planted tried to land on his foot, it would just collapse in, and people had to help him up and stuff like that. He had heat and pressure, literally a heat and pressure gauge wrap on his leg, on his upper hamstring area. He's on IR as of now. They got another kicker. He kicked the game-winning field goal, and then he got placed on IR, and now they've recently had Dicker the kicker. He is a dude that Kyle Vinoy, the clip has gone viral, I'm assuming, or NFL Football World viral. Kyle Vinoy mic'd up being like, what is the name of our kicker? And everybody being like, it's Dicker the kicker, and him being like, are you sure? Are you sure? Our kicker's name is Dicker the kicker? Because I don't want to go up to, which by the way, if you were an NFL player and you just really wanted to fuck with somebody, or if you wanted to give a nickname to a player on the team, and you just tell a lie to a player who was in a position of power on the team, like a team captain, be like, hey, what's that guy's name? You tell him a nickname that you want to give that guy, and then that becomes his nickname. For real. That's how I go. Anyway, Dicker the kicker goes out there and kicks a game-winning field goal. This was in the heartbreakers category because the Falcons yet again kind of tease us with the fact that they play good football and play high-quality football in short spurts, and it's never consistent, and it never looks pretty, but they're also very close to winning a bunch of these games that they're in, except when they got smoked by the Panthers. Not smoked, but in overtime, right? They keep getting really close to winning these games and then having things completely collapse. For instance, being able to recover a fumble for what potentially would have been a scoop and score all the way back for a game-winning touchdown, and instead fumbling the fumble recovery and then giving the ball back to the Chargers, which set them up for victory. Moving on, let's talk about something really sad. This is a Heartbreakers game. It's Patriots 26, Colts 3. Now, I'm going to do one of my favorite things. I'm just going to read off a bunch of really sad things that happened in this game, and that's what I'm going to use as my analysis for this one. Jonathan Taylor was ruled out before this game started. That was common knowledge before this game started. The Colts had 14 legitimately 1-4 third downs that they faced and converted 0 of those third downs that they faced in this game. Absolutely insane to think about that you can't stumble forward, but then don't worry, I can tell you why that happened. Sam Ehlinger in this game, in what truly might be the Colts offensive line jumping the shark, got sacked 9 times. 9 times in this one. Not a single person that is legally able to catch a ball in a football game for the Colts had over 25 yards. There was one player, and I want to say it was Ashton Doolin, shout out Ashton, with 23 yards in this game. Everybody else had under that because Sam Ehlinger had 108 yards total, and then he also got sacked for 60 yards in total. So he ended up with 30 yards or something like that, or 40 yards in total net yards in this game. The worst thing of all was the Patriots offense got cooked so bad by the Colts defense that there were 2 touchdowns in this game, and only one of them got scored by the Patriots offense. The Patriots defense, the final scoring play of this game was a pick 6 from Jonathan Jones. 17 yards inside the Colts' own red zone when they were trying to drive on what would have been their final drive of the game. It gets intercepted. They run it back for a touchdown. The other touchdown was a really simple one to Ramondre Stevenson, who, by the way, completely has usurped Damian Harris like we've all been speculating for the past 2 years, right? He continues to show that he is better than Damian, and the only downside of it is that we live in a world now where you can't just have one good running back. You got to have multiple. And it looks like Ramondre Stevens, by the time Damian gets back from whatever injury he has, Ramondre will be in complete control. The Bengals played the Panthers. This is in the Heartbreakers category. The final score in this one was 42-21. There's a flurry of reasons why this is in the Heartbreakers category, but I'll try and synthesize it. This one was borderline soul-crushing for me personally because I'm very much invested in P.J. Walker, as a quarterback. I'm from Houston. He played for the Houston Roughnecks in the season that he would have been named the XFL MVP. You hate to see a Panthers team that gives a very likable player like P.J. Walker, who subsequently is letting DJ Moore show why he is one of the best wide receivers in the NFL, and potentially turn their back on him after just one game. There was rumors that Baker Mayfield's going to be healthy and he's going to be available. That was squashed a couple of days later when they were PJ Walker is going to be the starter for Thursday Night Football, which is coming up in 14 minutes, and we're almost done talking about these NFL games. It is massively important that this Panthers team make sure that PJ doesn't have to worry about him losing his job, especially considering guess what, guys? Everybody who's got a job right now, shy of Brian Burns and Derek Brown and Ikem Okanu, who, by the way, killed it in this game. Too bad it was in a massively losing effort. The Panthers didn't score until the second half of this game. They were down 35-0 very early on, and Baker Mayfield came in and played quarterback, and he scored the only 3 touchdowns that they had in this game. Putting it together, being for real. It's time to be real on this one. The Panthers' entire coaching staff is fired after this season. Steve Wilkes is probably not going to be named the starting head coach. Actually, though, the Panthers are so bad, they might pull the old, they might do the thing where, oh man, we really believe in racial diversity right when our team seems to be at its absolute worst. And then we all of a sudden don't believe in racial diversity when our team is on the up and up again because you have this long history of sucking as a head coach with a team that we intentionally sabotaged to not be good. Anyway, they had that going on. Really glad that it has come down to PJ Walker being able to keep his job. Because it would suck for a team that legitimately is not in playoff contention, but technically kind of is. But a team that is not in playoff contention to be super reactionary and go back to a guy who legitimately was struggling to throw sprint outs and out routes and anything that went across the field that was further than 15 yards down the field, right? And now he doesn't have the blanket that was keeping him alive in most of these games in Christian McCaffrey. But yeah, that was tough. The Panthers didn't score until the second half of this game, and by that point, Joe Mixon had 4 rushing touchdowns, which, there's not too many times where you can just kind of bank on a game in the NFL being over, but this was one of those moments, especially considering the Panthers had 3 turnovers to go along with Joe Mixon's 5 touchdowns that he would end up with. They also killed them on third down. They converted 2 out of the 8 third downs that they saw. All bad things in terms of if your goal is to win, those are all bad things. Moving on to the oh my category of games for Week 9 of the NFL season. Sunday Night Football happened, and I honestly have a question. You tell me as a listener at home, is it impressive or sad? Malik Willis, straight out of Liberty, had 5 total completions, 5 completions in this game for less than 100 yards passing. None of those passes were completed to wide receivers. Interesting, mainly because the Titans run 7 tight ends on any given play, which of course, actually makes a lot of sense if you were, makes you wonder why they didn't keep Jonnu Smith a couple years ago, but whatever. Willis struggled with pocket presence a lot of this game. He was under almost immediate pressure a couple of plays, and he spent more time trying to escape and look cool. Not necessarily trying to look cool, but he spent more time trying to pull off Michael Vick level escapes and stuff like that. Yes, that is. Thank you, Quad Kevin. What up, dude? You changed your name. That's funny. Quad Kevin in the chat saying, is it impressive or sad? It's very sad after hearing only 5 passes were completed by an NFL team with a guy who gets paid money to play football. Anyway, he struggled a lot of the time when he was escaping the pocket. He was being pursued multiple, but it wasn't just one defensive end. More often than not, it was usually 3 of them trying to run him down, and instead of throwing the ball away, he spent a lot of time getting sacked, or getting into situations where he's trying to get around the edge, even though the defensive end has the edge and has the speed to keep him inside of it. That was a tough look. That's a tough look, especially. But the upside is he is a rookie quarterback, so maybe he can learn like everybody else. I would like to hope that a guy who is under the age of 25 can learn and get better and improve in life, especially in something that he actually cares about. So as time goes on, Ryan Tannehill's ankle is probably healing very slowly, and they almost spammed wins out of this one. They spammed a win versus the Texans. That one was easy. Best running back in the NFL versus the worst rush defense. Bad things usually happen. Bad places, bad things happen, and somehow mustered 17 points, by the way, with this system of only completing 5 passes and attempting only 15. So, got 17 points against a team that won a Super Bowl 2 years ago and has a literally generational talent at the quarterback position, and they were leading most of this game. That was probably the most impressive. This was probably the most impressive defensive performance in Week 9, next to the Jets versus the Bills, which we're going to get to a little bit later. They probably had the close second on this one. The Titans' offense blew this game for them. They had the lead, and then their offense just shut down in the second half. So that was fun for everybody. It was nothing short of a miracle. They lost this game by 3, even though they were leading most of this game. Once again, impressive or sad? Only time will tell. Quad Kevin says the sport changed his name and then wink face. That's a good point. Slightly, you know what? Touche. The next 2 games we're going to talk about, they're in the Heartbreakers category, and they're in the oh my category, and they're both 20-17 is the final score. The Jets beat the Bills. That's disturbing on a lot of levels because it sets people up for failure later on. That's a key win for the Jets. To think that the Bills were going to sweep the AFC East is highly unrealistic. Moronic, many would say. Even if the Jets were bad, trying to sweep against the Bills, even though they've lost 6 straight to the Patriots, whatever. We'll talk about that later. Huge win. This is one of those moments where a defense that, remember early on in the season on this podcast, we talked about how they were one of the hardest hitting defenses in the NFL. Not necessarily one of the best defenses, but they when the ball was thrown and they knew where to go, they were there immediately and violently. And it is now panned out into the Jets playing defense at a high level. Also, a lot of pressure on Josh Allen. The Bills fans continue to talk about their injury situations. I just want to let every Bills fan know, nobody cares. Nobody cares. Your injuries are not your opponent's problems. Anyway, the Vikings played the Commanders, and this was actually really funny. So at some point we're going to talk about the Vikings as whether they're real or fake, and there's only one time. The only time I think most of us would believe that they're for real is if they're hosting up the Super Bowl trophy at the end of this season. But, I, for one, love to give people grace. Most of this game was 10-7. Most of this game, the score was 10-7. The Commanders scored pretty consistent. I think they scored in 3 out of the 4 quarters. I would like to point out something that is quite sad for the Commanders, even though that's saying a lot, considering that their team released a statement using Brian Robinson getting shot in the leg as a scapegoat to attack the Attorney General of D.C., saying that they need to focus more on gun crime in D.C. than focusing on Dan Snyder, who's literally robbing the city of millions of dollars that we've recently come to light. Well, really, we should just assume that every sports team owner is robbing the cities that they're in, but that's a discussion for another day. The Vikings scored on their first drive of the game, and then they did not score again in this game until the fourth quarter with 7:53 to go. So, yeah, that's how bad it was for the Commanders in this one. They were scoring consistently, but it was all field goals, and the Vikings just needed a little bit of time. Their defensive pressure was top-notch, and it made Taylor Heinicke struggle a little bit. Even though Taylor's got a little bit of wiggle in this game when it comes to being under pressure. We've seen that over time, and of course, the wide receivers for the Commanders are consistently very good. The Commanders are one of those teams, man, where their defense shows up, but their offense doesn't. Their offense shows up, but their defense doesn't. They're never all on the same page. And in this game, obviously, the defense showed up for the Vikings, and the offense didn't. So, 17 points in a loss. Speaking of times where the offense didn't show up, the Lions beat the Green Bay Packers 15-9. If you watch this game, it is very much. There was multiple times in this game where I thought the wide receivers were given a different play to run than what Aaron Rodgers was given, and it looked like it more often than not. Aaron Rodgers was literally about to break his foot off in multiple wide receivers' asses throughout the course of this game, and I found that interesting. I really did. 5 minutes left, and we're going to dominate this because we only got like 4 games left. We got this. Packers versus Lions. Lions get a key win without depending on their offense to go out there and score 40 points for them to even have a chance in this one. Also, you gotta know all 52 cards in a row. Anyway, good luck to the Packers fans, not to the actual Packers. Although I like Kenny Clark and Kevin King and all those guys. Anyway, I like Jair Alexander. I like Rashawn Gary, who, by the way, one of the few 5-stars that makes it to the NFL and actually has panned out to be pretty damn good. Anyway, 15-9. This came down to a defensive stance where it looked like a wide receiver ran the wrong route in the end zone. Looked like Aaron Rodgers was expecting a wide receiver to break his route off to the left-hand side, and he ran to the inside. The safety almost intercepted it because he was like 5 steps away from where Aaron Rodgers threw it, and the wide receiver was like 20 yards away. So that was fun. Yeah, man, I don't know how many other passive-aggressive ways that Aaron Rodgers can say in the media that I need the wide receivers to step up because I can only do so much when I'm back there. Also, Packers still not believing in the run despite having a top 5 running back in the NFL. That's funny to me. This is what we're here for, the series of high-quality games that happened this week. The Dolphins played the Bears 35-32. Absolute banger again from the Bears. I'm sorry, from the Dolphins. 3 weeks in a row. Actually, really, you could say the Bears like 3 weeks in a row, kind of putting some bangers out there after that Cowboys game where they got smoked, but the game was entertaining. The Dolphins, 3 weeks in a row, very entertaining. 3 wins, 3 dubs, high-scoring affairs. Questions about the defense, we'll talk about that later. I will point out that for the Bears to score 32 points in this game, which I think is a season high in points scored for them overall as a team, for them to score all those points, Fields broke a long-standing Michael Vick record for rushing yards in a single game, and the Bears went medieval on the Dolphins' ass. They had 253 team rush yards, which, by the way, I think makes them the fourth team this season to rush for over 200 yards as a team. Feels like the Bears are finally playing like really free on the offensive side of the ball, while the defense is put in, I think, 3 of their worst performances of the entire season in the last 3 games. Fun for everyone. But this game was a lot of fun to watch. If there's one game that I would suggest for the 3rd week in a row that you go back and rewatch, it is the Dolphins. The Dolphins are the team that is having the most fun in the NFL this year, and it's not even close, really, in a lot of these senses. Jaguars played the Raiders. This game looked like it could potentially set you up to be super sad, and then the team that you kind of wanted to win more of these games won it. Josh McDaniels on the hot seat. The drama continues with the Raiders, who are sliding all the way to the bottom. They're going to the top of the NFL draft for next season. So Josh McDaniels doing his thing, and the Raiders offense with all the talent in the world still not mustering points. The Seahawks played the Cardinals. The Cardinals actually, I feel like I've been saying this for a month about the Cardinals. They're out there giving a couple of teams the business for like 2 quarters, and then they just disappear. The Cardinals went out there, they kind of did their thing. The Seahawks defense killing it again. I think this is the fourth week in a row they've held their team under 28 points or something like that. Scoring is down in the NFL across the board, but the Seahawks, God damn it, they said that we're going to carry the league on our back by ourselves. Geno Smith struggled a little bit in this one. Kenneth Walker the third did it again, and Geno Smith started cooking late in this game. I feel like, ladies and gentlemen, the Seahawks might be turning the corner, and they were already obviously starting from the bottom in a lot of people's minds and mentality. So like the fact that they're here at this point is still going to take a while to convince people that they're going to be successful. But fact of the matter is, they out there cooking, baby. The Buccaneers played the Rams. This one was almost ended up in the heartbreaker category. The only thing that saved it is a classic vintage Tom Brady game-winning drive when it was all said and done at the end of this one. It was truly immaculate, truly chef's kiss on this one. 2 of the saddest teams in the NFL, to be honest with you. Oh, how the mighty have fallen. The reigning Super Bowl champion and the Super Bowl champion just 2 years ago, led by 2 of the most dynamic quarterbacks that I've spent most of my young life watching. I'm 30 years old, so I say young life, but you know what I mean. Most of my life watching play football, and their teams look pretty bad, you know. I'm still one of those people that in the back of my mind, there's a part of me that thinks that the Rams are still going to turn the corner because Matthew Stafford is somehow going to make their offensive line better, even though I think he's doing everything in his power to be successful. Ravens at Saints. This one slipped into this is what we're here for category, mainly because of the crazy ass runs from Lamar Jackson. That was pretty much it. Everything else about this game seemed like it was kind of predetermined. Felt like to me personally, it never felt like the Saints were legitimately in contention to go on here and cook in this game. But, you know, that's just from my perspective. What do I know? I'm just a guy on the internet talking into a microphone. And speaking of doing that, I should stop doing that. It's officially 7:01, and ladies and gentlemen, we did not beat Father Time this week. Time wins again, so we're currently 1-2 versus Time. But thank you to everybody who showed up to the show, checked out everything that I had to say about each one of these games. Tell me what you think on Twitter. While you still can, I'm unverified on Twitter, just so you know. At FB_playbook, and then at the Ashton J is my personal account. Check it out. Tell me what you think. Tell me what you thought about Week 9 of the NFL season. Tell me what you think about the flurry of teams that are legitimately in Super Bowl contention, and maybe, you know, for as bad as a lot of people, because there's so many people who are hooked and addicted to like scoring points and offense and stuff like that. I, for one, totally understand it's super boring to watch a 21-14 game sometimes. But these close one-possession games, like we just read off like multiple one-possession games that we put in the heartbreaker category. But the fact of the matter is, man, it's a lot more teams than I thought. When I sat down and thought about it, it's a lot more teams than I thought that are legitimately Super Bowl contenders based off of how some of these games have been ridiculously close when it's all said and done. On that note, I'm going to stop talking. Thursday Night Football's on. Thank you for joining me before Thursday Night Football kicked off. Wash your hands, wash your ass, and be kind and do good. There we go.